Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Connect with your potential customers wherever they are. Effective uses Comcast viewership data insights to combine advanced targeting capabilities with premium TV and streaming content, so you can deliver the best ad experiences to your audience no matter how they watch. Visit EFFECTV.com.
Hello world, you're listening to Strategicon, your window to all things security and foreign affairs. While the rest of the world ruminates over Julian Assange's arrest in London, Benjamin Netanyahu's electoral win in Israel and Libya's growing civil war, we thought we'd take a different turn and look at Japan. On May 1st, the current Emperor Akihito is set to abdicate. As every Japanese emperor reigns in his own specific era, the post-Akihito era has been named Reiwa, promising a period of order and harmony. But the situation through Northeast Asia is far from orderly and harmonious. Strategic and commercial competitor, the People's Republic of China, is becoming more internally repressive, especially against the Tibetan and Uyghur people. Beijing is more emboldened strategically under Premier Xi, with China taking a strong line against Taiwan and any pro-independence sentiment the country has, and it continues to intimidate the weaker Southeast Asian claimant states in the South China Sea, especially the Philippines. North Korea continues to haunt the region with uncertainty over whether or not it reaches any decisive agreement with the United States and South Korea to draw a line under its endless military confrontation with both countries. Japan and South Korea have had their first major diplomatic spat since the problems over compensation for South Korean World War II comfort women, with Japan accusing the South Koreans of targeting one of their maritime reconnaissance flights while on a routine patrol last December. So what will the Reiwa Imperial Era spell for Japan? Will it be an era for order and peace as the name suggests? In this episode, we'll be joined by Sage International Australia's Professor Purnendra Jain, a resident expert on Japan and Northeast Asia, to discuss these issues. Before we start today's episode, I would like to remind listeners that Strategicon can be found on the Ozcast Network, iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, and on the Sage International Australia website, www.sageinternational.org.au. Welcome David Olney, John Bruni, and Purnendra Jain.
Purnendra, can you please walk us through the significance of the imperial changeover? Will we see that much difference in the way Japan is administered, or are these things more of a subtle nature?
Thank you, John. We need to underline that this is the first abdication in Japan's constitutional history. Before this time, every time when the emperor passed away, then accession took place. So this is quite significant in itself that the current emperor decided to abdicate and the government accepted his request to abdicate. In terms of politics and administration, I don't think there will be lots of changes because of a new emperor, because the emperor in Japan is considered as a symbol of the state. So with no real political or administrative powers as such. And it happened after World War II, when Japan got defeated, a new constitution was written. Under that constitution, the divinity of the emperor was abolished. So emperor became kind of an ordinary citizen of Japan with all the, with all the duties which go with this particular imperial outfit. But in terms of government and administration, it's going to be a massive exercise. And we will come to that because with a new emperor, there is a new era. And with this new era, they have to change the entire stationery. They have to reprogram all the computers because they have their year one will start on 1st of May.
So are we looking for a Japanese Y2K moment?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Put it simply, yes,
Right.
it is. But I guess they are fully prepared and they have worked it out. So this will be a big switch over on 30th of April at midnight, and then 1 past 12 on 1st of May.
What happens if the system crashes?
Well, I think they must have tested and retested to make sure that everything will work. And it's not just government, it's banking, financial institutions, businesses. They all use that era name as day and date.
Is there some sort of supernatural connotation if it all falls over? Like, for instance, we get to the 1st of May and the computers aren't working as well as they should and the banking structure starts looking a bit crumbly. What happens then?
I think the Japanese should be very confident given their high-tech expertise. As I said, they must have tested, retested, make sure that everything works and change over takes place at midnight on 30th of April and 1st of May, everything is in order.
Okay.
And that's the day I think the new emperor takes this position and the current emperor abdicates.
It should be absolutely fascinating to see that, on that morning people will go to get on the train, get their newspaper on the way to the train, and already, the mast on the newspaper will have changed.
Yes, it will happen.
So many things on that day look different.
Yes.
A strange thing is all these people that have bought a yearly diary. There will be this massive run now on diaries that now show this change correctly. So there's a boon there for some industries to sell a second version things or an update. So it's almost like this wonderful concept of here's a restart day where we can conceive of ourselves in a slightly different way. For a really odd reason.
Yeah. So I think with a new emperor coming on the throne, there will be some business activity and the economy will be regenerated because there is so much work created because of this changeover. But I think I just wanted to mention, because you said that was the significance. I want to talk about what happened the last time around when Emperor Hirohito passed away in 1989. And he was the longest reigning emperor of Japan. He started in 1926 and passed away in 1989. So when he passed away, of course, his son, the current emperor, became the emperor of Japan, Emperor Akihito. But it was a huge political debate and controversy about Emperor Hirohito. Because when he was Japan's emperor, World War II took place. So lots of analysts, scholars, historians, they were making commentary on his responsibility for the war and how he went unpunished after the war. In fact, the Americans decided in their wisdom that the emperor system should continue and the emperor should not be held responsible for war. Although, of course, his powers and his functions were curtailed and divinity was taken away from this particular institution. But still, it remained a very, very important, and it has remained a very, very important institution in Japan. No one in Japan talks about getting rid of the imperial household or imperial household agency or the emperor system. So it's very much, this particular history is very much intact in Japan. And Japan is the only country, I would think, that still follows this Chinese characters to designate a new era when a new emperor comes. I don't think anywhere in the world this kind of thing happens.
See, that's a very interesting thing you bring up there, Purnendra, that this is the first time that they've chosen the phrase from a Japanese text rather than a Chinese classical text. And there was stuff written about this in the first couple of days that it was announced, and not having the historical knowledge, I go, okay, it's different, but I don't understand why that's important. Can you enlighten us as to why it's so important to have chosen from a Japanese text for the first time?
Yes, it's quite interesting because in the past, the Japanese, there's a very complex system of choosing a particular era name. It's done of course, by the government. And the Chief Cabinet Secretary announces the name of the new era. But they have a process. They invite a number of intellectuals to put in, suggest names, which could be then which a committee could choose from. So this time there were 6 or 7 for them to choose from. And they chose this particular name called Reiwa. And this comes from an 8th century Japanese classic literature called Manyoshu, which means a collection of 1,000 poems. But in the past, as David said, it was chosen from a Chinese classic literature. And it clearly shows how Japan is becoming nationalistic and is trying to get out from the shadow of China. And that's why I think the Abe government chose this particular name rather than going for any name chosen from one of the Chinese classic literatures.
Now, there's a real tension with the phrase that's been chosen too, isn't there? That people are arguing over how to read it. It was something like, the difference between, was it beautiful order or beautiful authority, that it can be read in different ways?
I think it's order and harmony.
Order and harmony. That difference in those two words. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they have, I think some, Japanese linguists have provided lots of, interpretation. But in simple terms, it's order and harmony, right? But harmony is a character, Chinese character, included in Japanese character, has been used. Like if you look at Emperor Hirohito, it was called Showa. So that wa of Reiwa, wa, is the same.
Oh, the same
Same
half.
character.
Okay.
So harmony.
Yeah.
So harmony was there. So even in Heisei, there is this character Hei, first character, is peace. So they have been kind of choosing characters which have got connotations of peace, harmony. It's very Confucius in some way, harmony. And Japan, the idea of peace, harmony, order, perhaps one could say that these are words of wishful thinking, but it also gives connotation that Japan wants to give this message that they still want a kind of order, structured and harmony, rather than going for conflict or going for, other kinds of issues which we see in the world, as you said in your introductory remarks, that how things are, Brexit or what's happening in Israel or in South Korea, North Korea. So it's kind of very symbolic, and the emperor himself is symbolic of Japan's.
Can I just say, would you account the longevity of the Japanese imperial system to the fact that those who constitute the imperial system are not caught up in so many salacious, newsworthy stories as opposed to what happens, for instance, in the United Kingdom?
Yeah, in some sense, yes. But, the imperial household in Japan is a very secluded, protected institution. The emperor or the crown prince or princess, they are not seen in public in the same way as you see imperial, queen or prince and princess in lots of places, going overseas, doing lots of other things. They do appear, but in a very structured way, in a very limited way. So some kind of privacy is maintained, and that gives in the Japanese mind some kind of grace to that institution.
It's sort of an otherness, isn't it? Whereas the British royals go out because it's so economically valuable.
Yeah.
Whereas if you want to see the remains of royalty in Japan, you go and look at the outside of the palace. It's about coming to see the otherness.
Yeah. It's quite amazing because
true.
when you go to Edo Palace, and I didn't really quite understand this until I got really close to it, it doesn't matter how close you get to it, you're not really that close. And you can't get a good picture of Edo Palace either because of the,
They've never sold it as a benefit for tourism or industry.
They opened the Imperial Palace for a couple of days on certain occasions. And the emperor appears on January the 1st or 2nd from his balcony, waving at people. There are thousands of people. They go with the Japanese flag and wave. But these are very rare things which happen. But the current emperor, who will finish end of this month, you have seen him going to places when there are natural disasters, for example, in Japan. So he and the empress would go 311, for example, in Japan, March 2011. He visited several places when there are other kinds of natural disasters. He goes there, expresses his condolences for those who lost their lives, and asks about how people are doing. And this emperor has also traveled quite widely. He went to China early on, just to make sure that the relationship between Japan and China, to a certain extent, becomes friendly. So he visited China early on. Then he also went to Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. He went to a number of Southeast Asian countries which were occupied by Japan. He also went to India. So he has been, he has expressed interest both in domestic issues as well as international issues. So in one sense, he is secluded and excluded, but on the other hand, he has been quite active or proactive, which is quite different from his father, Emperor Hirohito.
It seems like he does just enough that if he does it, you should think about why. So when Japan and South Korea co-hosted the World Cup, and he came out and made the comments about the historical links between Korea and Japan as a way to sort of diffuse tensions, to make sure that could work better. So by him not going many places that often, when he does, it's clearer that there's something that the world should pay attention to.
You are right.
And go that this has got a deep implication for how Japan wants to relate in its neighborhood. Yeah.
This is true. And I think with the new emperor, Naruhito, and his wife, Masako, she comes from an ordinary family in Japan, as did the current emperor's wife. Before that, they're married in the imperial family. His wife Michiko, she's a daughter of a diplomat, and she herself joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but she got married to the prince, so she had to leave her job. So she underwent lots of psychological issues, how to cope with, because there are things which you can do, which you can't do. And coming from an ordinary family, it becomes very difficult to adjust. But I think she has adjusted now. So hopefully there will be more kind of people's emperor and empress, even more than his father. So we will see some change as to what the emperor may or may not do.
So speaking about people, how do you think the average Japanese person views the changeover? I mean, is there a palpable sense of excitement among the folk in Japan? And also, what about republicanism in Japan? Is there a nascent republican movement who will try to pour scorn on events like we would find in, say, Australia, the UK, or anywhere else in the sort of Anglosphere that's part of the British monarchy?
Well, the point is Japan doesn't have any colony and no one follows Japan's rules and regulations. There is no Commonwealth of Japan. But there is no sense in Japan, I think, that they want to get rid of this institution. So most people, they were very happy. They are happy. Of course, there are debates about the choice of this particular name because some who are liberal, some who are progressive, they think that we are not giving the right signals to the world by choosing this particular Japanese name rather than going for Chinese classic literature. So there is a whole lot of debate, but in terms of acceptance, I think there is a wide acceptance of the imperial structure and the new emperor.
What are the main issues facing Japanese society today, and of course moving forward into this new imperial era, that will probably characterize the beginning of the Reiwa period?
Well, I think Japanese society is undergoing some serious challenges. And one of the most important ones, I would think, is demography of Japan. Population is aging and shrinking. And if you have got more elderly people than you have got young people, that's an issue, that's a problem. It has economic implications, it has got employment implications. So that is a huge issue at the moment. And also in Japan, we have got the issue of depopulation of rural and semi-rural areas. So there are not many young people in regional cities and regional towns. So what you are left with is all the elderly people. They need care, they need medicine, they need hospitals. So there is a budgetary strains on a stress, you can say, even to look after these people. Also, there are not many health workers, there are not many health professionals, there are not many helpers. So how to deal with these issues is a big challenge for the Abe government. And Japan just had one phase of its local elections last weekend, and there will be another phase of elections in 10 days' time. And one of the major issues has been how to deal with this particular issue. They don't have an answer, but they have said that this is an issue and we need to do something about it. One of the things they can do is to invite foreign workers in Japan, but there is no clear consensus in Japan about that. Japan is very reluctant. Japanese are very reluctant to have foreigners around them. So let's see how that unfolds. But Japan doesn't have many choices.
It's slightly different to like a Western country in that they have that sense of karoshi, right? So that problem of older people outweighing the younger population, the economic impact of that would be lesser than it would be in a Western country because the people are working literally till death.
Yeah, I mean, karoshi is an issue which is death by overwork, right? Because Japanese, traditionally, they work long hours and there is very little time for them to go on holidays, for example. They feel it's embarrassing for them to ask for holidays from their employers. So very small number of people go on holidays. But luckily, the accession of this new emperor, and in Japan in April time, they have got what they call Golden Week. So this time they are getting 10 days of period of holiday in Japan, which is very well received in some quarters in Japan. But it also creates problems for small businesses, where do they access their people to run 24/7 all their stores and things like that. But yeah, you were right. Yeah.
You're listening to Strategicon on the Ozcast network. Right now we're going to have a musical break with a local band from Adelaide, Flat Moon Society. This is a song called Double Down. You can find them on Spotify and also check out their local gigs around Adelaide. Once again, that's Flat Moon Society. Currently, you're listening to episode 57 of Strategicon on the Ozcast network, where we're talking about Imperial Japan in the modern age. Flat Moon Society, Double Down. You can find them on Spotify. Once again, that's Flat Moon Society. Currently, you're listening to episode 57 of Strategicon on the Ozcast network, where we're talking about Imperial Japan in the modern age.
Can we say that Japan is transitioning to a more robust strategic doctrine, considering the various uncertainties that it faces, especially with regard to the rise of the People's Republic of China?
Yeah, that's a very...
we just jumped from the sensible and the cultural into how deep is that pit?
Well, we are Strategicon. We do sort of address everything in a very general and broad sense.
We were going down the road nicely, and we've just hit a pothole bigger than the car.
It's okay. That's my job.
Foreign workers to look at the People's Republic of China and Japan's transitioning. Yes, I think we can see Japan's security defense policy undergoing significant changes. They're still very cautious in their introducing new policies, but nevertheless, they have got new policies in place. And I would think that Japan has become a robust military power, although, of course, they don't have theoretically a military. They have got what they call self-defense force. But if you look, especially since Abe became second time Prime Minister in 2012, Japan for the first time adopted a national security strategy in 2013. Never ever Japan had a national security strategy. In 2015, the Abe government revised the guidelines for US-Japan defense cooperation. Japan had a new legislation for peace and security and collective self-defense. It never used to be the case. And Japan has also changed its arms exports policy. And they're building their military hardware and software to an extent we never saw in Japan to that extent. So they have issued a midterm defense program last year. They also issued a national defense program guidelines last year. And if you read those two documents together, you can see concerns about China. You can see the instability in Northeast Asia, in particular their nervousness with regards to North Korea. So they are preparing themselves to a certain extent, also knowing that whether or not they can get full support from the United States if the penny drops.
It's really interesting that they're building up in a period where they've got such demographic problems, because it means trying to get good personnel at the levels they may need in the long run will be a problem, meaning they need to transition to as many automated systems as possible. So by demographic necessity, it might put them at the cutting edge of the transformation in technology to automate as much stuff as possible. So having an export industry for them now, well, we didn't buy their submarines. No. In the main, no one's probably going to want their current generation technology. But if they do a better job of automation, being that they've got such a lead on industrial robotics and stuff, they might be positioned very well to be a next generation provider of advanced, less personnel systems.
You're absolutely right, David, on that, because and they don't need too many foot soldiers.
No.
And you are right that they need to have advanced technology, and this is what Japan is good at. Right? We know we didn't buy their submarines, but it doesn't mean that they have got inferior quality submarines.
No, they were the ones they use are very good. The ones we could have were less good.
Yes, so they have good technology. They have got good existing technology, and they are working on their technology, and they have got cutting edge technology. So they are now applying that technology into their military, which they did not do in the past. And also they do buy from the United States because there is a whole lot of pressure. If you look at all the fighter planes in Japan, they almost all come from the United States. So the Abe government is trying to sort out the issue of trade imbalance by buying more and more military hardware from the United States, including sophisticated fighter jets. So
we've seen a JSF go down in Japan this week.
That's a bit unfortunate, but this is what happened 2 days ago.
Yeah. But with regard to that, of course, there's going to be a concern in Tokyo with regard to the robustness of US military systems. I mean, it's one thing to say, well, okay, we've got a trade imbalance, let's start buying up a lot of US technology. But in case certain bits of US technology don't operate at a very good parameter, say for instance, I don't know, JSF,
and
Osprey,
yes.
Well, what happens to Japanese planners who are planning a defense against an existential threat, maybe the People's Republic of China or North Korea? Their entire defense edifice is predicated on US military technology working properly.
Yeah, but I would argue it's not on US technology working properly, it's on the Japanese making it work better. Because consistently what they've done to US planes has made them work better. So why wouldn't they do the same? JSF is early days. My assumption would be that in 2 years' time, the only JSFs you would want to have is the Japanese ones.
If they'd ever be able to be released for export, yeah.
Well, yes.
Well, they're not, but my point being is that's going to be the one to have. We're not going to be able to have them,
sure.
But it's going to be the one to have. The things that they've bought and improved, the comment is made so often with Japan, don't let them make the first version, let them improve something else, and they will improve it brilliantly.
Yeah. Let's also consider this point, that at this point in time, Japan still has constitutional constraints. And it cannot create a force which is for combat or this is for attack. They still have got defense, self-defense, right? So self-defense is the key word for Japan. So they still believe in civilian role rather than military role overseas. It could be peacekeeping forces, it could be other kinds of stuff, rebuilding war zones, and when civil war erupts, go and do, rebuilding and things like that. So I think whatever Japan is spending at the moment, this is to maintain or to strengthen its security ties with the United States on the one hand, and the second, to make sure that Japan has enough capacity and capability to, if it is attacked, then it can, it has enough.
Robust defense in that first 36 to 48 hours.
That's right. So this is what they're. We're seeing what's happening around around the East China Sea, for example. I was reading some statistics that if you look at the number of scramble which Japanese fighter planes have got around the East China Sea, they used to have about 300 scramble 4 years ago, but last year they had more than 1,200. So obviously there are fighter planes coming from China over the Senkaku Island, which is from Chinese perspective, it's in dispute. From Japan's perspective, no, there is no dispute because Japan administers it. Then we also have got Russian aircraft coming to the north part of Japan, and they are generally, I think they do a spying or whatever they do, but they scramble there as well. So Japan's air self-defense force has become very busy in the last 3-4 years.
What would you say if the best way for Japan would be to deploy some form of theatre high altitude defense system on the disputed islands and then force an air blockade against anything coming in from China? The Chinese have got their air defense zone, which they unilaterally put up over parts of their coast and the approaching waters. So why would the Japanese not be able to do something similar?
Well, I think Japan is very careful and very cautious. They don't want to give any message to anyone that they are trying to be offensive in their so they want to remain defensive. So they want to defend their territory. They want to do what is necessary for them to defend their territory. But if that comes to that situation, maybe at some stage Japan might think if there are more North Korean missiles landing on Japanese waters, or if Japan really thinks that China is becoming a real threat, they might revise their constitution. I mean, Abe is already trying to.
Yeah, the process has already begun. There's already an irritant inside the shellfish.
Yes.
The pearl just hasn't grown yet.
That's right. Yeah,
and if we look at this in the long term, we're talking about an island at the moment. Yeah. But now that we know there are massive amounts of rare earth minerals off the Japanese coast. And that at the moment, the technology doesn't exist to bring them up yet, but the Japanese will solve that in 10 years. That's almost guaranteed.
Correct, yeah.
So suddenly, being able to defend huge stretches of water, against planes, ships, and submarines, becomes critically important for the economic future of Japan.
Right, and the U.S. under the Security Treaty, the United States will come to rescue Japan from
particularly for rare earth minerals, more so than anything else.
Okay, yeah.
So South Korea and Japan recently came to a serious diplomatic breach of the alleged South Korean targeting of a Japanese maritime patrol aircraft. What would be the implications were this incident to completely break good relations between Tokyo and Seoul? And is this likely ever to happen?
This is an interesting question. One would think that Japan and South Korea, both being U.S. allies in Northeast Asia, would and should cooperate and work together in dealing with North Korea, in dealing with the security environment in that part of the world. But that has not been the case. Because I think history is an issue between Japan and South Korea. There is a bit of an issue with a little group of islets called Takeshima in Japanese and Dokdo in Korean. At the moment that those islets are there are South Korean coast guards there, so it has been kind of occupied from Japan's perspective by South Korea, and Japan claims that these belong to Japan. So that's one issue. The other issue is, I think David mentioned about the comfort women issue. It seemed that this issue was almost settled in 2015 when then President Park in South Korea, she signed a piece of agreement with Japan as a final and irreversible agreement on the question of comfort women. But with the coming of the Moon administration in South Korea, he doesn't honor that agreement. So the whole can of worm, if you like, is open again. And that has created real tension between Japan and South Korea. And also Japanese think that the current administration in South Korea is too appeasing to North Korea. So that's also a sticking point between Japan and South Korea.
So if there's any continuance of the Sunshine Policy in any way, shape or form, this is going to aggravate the bilateral relations between South Korea and Japan, even though it's probably in the global common's best interest to see peace on the Korean peninsula.
Yeah, but part of this is we keep looking at this as the real issue with North Korea is always China, because it's China that needs defense in depth. It's China that needs North Korea to be compliant so that the Korean peninsula is not too dangerous towards China. Yeah. So until we move the analysis to how do we get the PRC to manage North Korea better, we're never really going to resolve the issue.
Maybe they are, managing North Korea very well. I mean, they're obviously stoking the fires well enough.
They're managing North Korea for exactly the ends they need, which is instability for everyone else.
Yeah.
And what we see here is how deep the historical problems between South Korea and Japan are. I had an intern do a project on this. Is there any chance of Japanese and South Korean intelligence working effectively together? And he started super hopeful and got to the end going, no hope. They want a hub and spoke model where there is always they relate to each other through the common hub of the US. So in a sense, you can extend this more broadly in our region to we're in the same hub and spoke model. The whole point of the Japanese and Australia, talking about buying submarines was so the Americans could say, you guys start interacting with each other. Stop the spending on the hub and spoke.
Yeah.
So Korea, South Korea, Japan, Australia are all failing to grasp the direction the Americans are sort of kicking us in, which is get beyond hub and spoke and start meaningfully interacting.
Yeah, I think Japan has very little leverage in relation to North Korea. So Japan has to depend on the United States, and that's why, Prime Minister Abe has offered his friendship to Trump. He's very close to Trump because Japan knows that the only possibility for them to have a deal with North Korea will be through the United States.
Okay, well, so China, in spite of its race to the top of the military technology tree, is still way behind the United States and is likely to stay pegged in the number 2 position for a long time to come. How will this reality rub up against its ambition to best the US in the Western Pacific? Are the Japanese at least confident about their own techno-industrial base in terms of countering Chinese moves in the Western Pacific?
Well, I think the short answer to this question is that, as I said, that Japan doesn't have that force projection capability. So it's not going to go and fight for the United States or even fight for some other country, despite the fact that they are saying that collective defense. So Japan constitutionally is not allowed to do that. So even if it has got capacity, it cannot use its capacity anywhere except to defend Japan. So unless Japan changes its constitution or makes some drastic changes in its legislation, Japan is not able to do this kind of activity.
This is interesting because it leads us to the next major question.
Well, can I jump in before we get to the next one?
Yeah.
See, this is fascinating about the fact that when the Japanese population is surveyed, the political elite can see the benefit in change. The general populace have been normalized to the idea of pacifism.
Yes.
So when you've got an elite that can see the changing game, but a population who've been affected by 70 years of education and social policy to choose pacifism, you have a built-in incongruity between those who lead and those who follow.
Yes, yeah, you are absolutely right. But if you look at some of the recent polls in Japan, since Abe came and introduced all this new legislation about security and this national security strategy, slowly, gradually, I think now people are coming to accept, but still, in Japan, David, as you have said, that 70 years of social education about pacifism and pacifist constitution of Japan, there is very little appetite in Japan and within the Japanese public for the country to go and do fighting or get involved into any war kind of situation.
Even collective defense seems to be more than the Japanese population as a whole want.
Absolutely, yes.
But is the 70 years of social education, or let's say, outweighed by the long history of what I could only describe as xenophobia or
but they've kind of got a combo of xenophobia. They don't want foreigners to come and look after old people. So the cultural norms at one level stayed the same, but the political norms were fundamentally altered, which was exactly what MacArthur tried to achieve from the time he took control. And that is leave the cultural norms intact that are beneficial to social cohesion and change the political norms in terms of violence.
Absolutely, yes. So,
and then leave those two things dangerously imbalanced, which was eventually going to become a problem when regional tensions built.
Yeah, it has worked to a certain extent, but whether it will work in the future is uncertain in my view. I think the Abe government, the Abe government has introduced a new legislation where they are losing up on immigration, but still it's very restrictive, how many years you can come, whether you can come with your family or you can't come with your family. It's very, very restrictive, but they want to experiment, foreign workers into Japan. But I don't think it's enough at this stage and too little too late. So they have to have a radical policy in place if they want foreign workers to come in Japan and do the kinds of service and jobs which they require from them to do.
But you've got a population that have, again, that kind of long history of like tensions with China or pretty well most other kind of Asian powers, right? And so can the elite leverage that on the public to take them out of the pacifism, is what I'm kind of saying. Like if
they're continuously trying to do that.
They're trying it. Okay. Yeah, they're trying it. I mean, one of the things which Mr. Abe is trying to do is to change the constitution, and what he's proposing that at least we should put the self-defense force as a constitutional body recognize that in the Constitution, because the Self-Defense Force is not a constitutional organization. It was created through legislation, because if you read Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution, it prohibits Japan from maintaining any air force or army or navy. But they still have got those things in the name of self-defense force, right?
So with regard to the strategic picture that we're facing in the Far East and the Western Pacific and, dare I say, the Indo-Pacific, we're starting to see the beginnings of a soft Cold War between the PRC and the United States. So one of the architectures that have been created was the quadrilateral dialogue. Is this dialogue an effective way of militarily containing China? And what is India's role in this? I mean, from my last visit to New Delhi last year, I was under the impression that there was a lot of Indian antipathy with regard to the quadrilateral dialogue. They kind of wanted to become more, but people are dragging their feet. Would the Japanese also be very much in favor of dragging their feet, not wanting to get involved in a potential stoush between India and Pakistan, for example?
I think this quadrilateral framework is an idea which was proposed by Mr. Abe when he became Prime Minister way back in 2006, 2007. At that time there was interest in Japan and in the US and Australia as well. But soon kind of dissipated, not much interest. The Red government came and said, no, we are not interested because the Chinese might think we are, ganging up against China. The Indian government also was lukewarm. So it didn't go ahead much. But with the coming of or returning of Abe as Prime Minister of Japan since 2012, he has brought this agenda back. As you were saying, John, is right. I mean, India is very reluctant to see this quadrilateral framework as any kind of military framework. Certainly not military. So it's a dialogue framework. But even then, as a dialogue framework, I think they haven't gone much far on this issue. So what's happening, there is more kind of trilateral at the moment, US, Japan, India, kind of a trilateral thing, and Japan, Australia, India, trilateral. So they're doing more trilateral rather than quadrilateral. So I don't think at this stage quadrilateral is going to move forward.
So we keep ending up back at the hub and spoke models where the US has to be involved for everyone else to play together. Where it seems to me the point of the quadrilateral was so America could be involved initially and then step back and go, get on with it, you lot.
Yeah, you're right. And also if you look at India, I mean, you raised the question about India. If you look at India, India has got a trilateral with China and Russia. So there is China, India, Russia trilateral. Yeah. India is part of SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
Correct.
And India is very much interested, and it has got very close relationship with Russia. So if you look at Japan's relationship with Russia and India's relationship with Russia, kind of they are far apart from each other, right? Completely different. Yep. But still, it doesn't mean, I mean, still, China, Japan and India, they're trying to do things together. They're trying to, where India thinks its interests are served, then they are with Japan. But where they see that it can become a strategic liability for them, they try to distance themselves from Japan. So similarly on China issue as well, they have got a little bit of different viewpoints. And also with regards to the US, they have got different viewpoints.
Right. Purnendra, that's a wrap. So
thank
you for joining us on this episode of Strategicon.
Thanks very much, John and David.
Thank you, Purnendra.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We hope that you'll join us for our next exciting adventure through the world of geopolitics. Remember that you can subscribe to Strategicon through the Ozcast network, iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Spotify. And please like us on the Sage International Australia Facebook site and follow us on Twitter. We appreciate your support. Also, please comment on any of our articles and podcasts through Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and of course on the Sage International Australia website. We welcome any constructive feedback that can help us improve our products, and we look forward to engaging with our followers. Until next time, goodbye.
Connect with your potential customers wherever they are. Effective uses Comcast viewership data insights to combine advanced targeting capabilities with premium TV and streaming content, so you can deliver the best ad experiences to your audience no matter how they watch. Visit EFFECTV.com.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.